Well, let's not wait any longer. I don't know about you, but I hate these workshops or webinars where, first you have like a 20-minute introduction and then finally at the end you get to the good bits. So I'm gonna just launch into sharing my book experiences, hoping that it will help you with your book as well. I'm really thrilled that there's so many people who are thinking about writing a book. And I can tell you first that it's really, really worth it. And it's worth it for several reasons. First, if this something has been in your mind for so long, you can try to repress it, you can try to postpone it. But if you find a way to put it onto paper and to share it with other people, it will be very rewarding. The other thing is, if you have an important message to share or your story will impact people, the sooner it's available to them, the sooner you can start making a difference. If it all stays in your head or in a computer file, you're not going to impact anybody. And surprisingly, I meet a lot of writers who say, well, I've actually finished my book, but it's still in my laptop. I've never, I didn't dare to put it out there, or, it's not completely finished, or it's such a pity if you've already put so much work into it. And I think the reason why we're writing is we want to share with other people, whether it's a story or whether it's an important message. So the reason to do it is, first is satisfaction. Second, to get your message out there. Third, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to put more attention into your other services or products, this is also a great way to do it. A book is a great business card. And if people like what you're writing, they're more willing to work with you. If they like your method or your tone of voice or your personality or your approach, they're more likely to choose you over another coach or consultant or whatever it is that you do. And you kind of leave a legacy. If one day you're not here anymore, your ideas are still existing. They're still here. And also, when you try to share what you know one-on-one, you can only reach so many people. And I've been a speaker for many years. I've given over 1,000 keynote speeches. And then you reach maybe 100 people at a time, sometimes 1,000, or maybe even 3,000 at a time. But it's still limited to the moment that you are on stage and you're actually talking to people. And with a book, there's a number of books that are printed and then people read it, and one book reaches 3 to 5 people because you keep it, you read it again, you give it to somebody else. So it's a great way to reach people when you're not there. Anne is saying she doesn't have sound. If you're the only one, Anne, then maybe it's a good idea to log out and log back in. And anyway, you're going to receive the recording. Yeah. And then you can listen if you miss anything.
Yeah, it's okay now. No.
Okay. Can you mute your microphone again?
Okay, yeah.
Let's mute your microphone again. Can you do that? Turn off your microphone? Yes, there we are. Perfect. Yeah, so I do want everybody to be able to participate and to get all this information and to ask your questions as well. So let me start with my book journey. And this is also the reason I wanted to talk to you guys. My first book is this, What is Your Excuse? And it was published in 2009. And I wrote this book without knowing anything about book writing. I just had a story that needed to be shared. And I found a publisher and they said, okay, you start writing and we'll publish it. So I was writing, and I was writing like many writers do. You start on page 1 and you struggle and you plow and you push and you work. And then at some point you reach the last page. That's linear writing. You start at the beginning and you finish at the end. And it did work because there is a book, but don't ask me how difficult it was. There were so many times when I thought, I feel like I'm reinventing the wheel. Why doesn't anybody tell me how this works? There are so many people before me who have written a book, but there's no information. There's information about creative writing. There's information about lots of things, but not about the process of writing a book. And the publisher didn't really help me either. They said, well, you just start and at some point you finish and then we'll edit and we'll publish and we'll design the book and whatever. But nobody told me about this process and all the ups and downs and all the doubts you have and all the times you have to go back and rewrite. And when I finished the book, I thought, now I know the whole process. I think this could be done in a smarter way. And I started to experiment and I wrote more books. And now I'm at about 30 books that I published, either as an author or a co-author or a contributor to a book. And the good news for you is that I've perfected the method. And you can take a lot of the problems and the delay and the extra work out of the book writing, and you can do it in a very effective way. It's still a lot of work. So I have to give you that, but it can be fun. What if what I did, I had to manage the process and I had to do the creative process. So I couldn't let my creative juices flow because I had to make sure that we ended up in the right direction. And if you're too focused on the structure, it's like two different parts of your brain, right? So I found if you work on the structure first, then you have a great container for your creative energy. And when you create this structure, then you can let your creative juices flow. And it doesn't matter if you work on chapter 3 and then go to chapter 7 and then to chapter 13 and back to chapter 1, because the structure is clear. And that was the biggest finding for me. Instead of trying to write a book linear and struggling, and you always end up at a point where you get stuck, and then you have to go back and rewrite. And it means you have to restructure, you have to rewrite big parts, and that's not what you want, because at that point you feel like other things are more important. I have to do the dishes, I have to rearrange my office, I have to do my admin, my whatever you normally don't want to do, you want to do it when you get stuck with your book. Let me show you this image about the process. Let me see, where is it? I'm just gonna try and find it like this. This is the traditional writing method that I did in my first book, and it's also the reverse writing method that I discovered. So normally you start writing and you're enthusiastic and you think, hey, I'm writing my book. And for the first days or weeks or even months, you're doing great. And then at some point, inevitably, you get stuck. And if you don't manage that, your book will end up in a drawer or in the trash bin in your computer. If you do manage it, you will make lots of unnecessary turns until maybe you'll end up with a book. What I propose is you start with an idea. If you don't have a good idea, there's ways to find proven formats that you can write your book. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Choosing a title is not a creative process. Choosing a title is actually a way to choose your audience and to look at search words that they use. Your title and subtitle are just search words to be found online. And of course, you can still choose a nice title, but you also have to take into account the competition, what else is there. You have to take into account the words that your audience uses, not the words you like as a professional. And when you have a title, you start writing your back cover. And that's the interesting part. Normally, writing the back cover is the last page of your book. But if you start with that, you have your sales material. This is what you read as a buyer of a book on Amazon, online, in a bookstore. This is what you read, and based on this, you decide if you're going to buy a book. A publisher is going to read this back cover, your blurb, your book proposal, your elevator pitch, to decide if they're going to work with you. If you want to find funding, if you want to pre-sell your book, if you want to find partners, this one page is what will make your book come to life or not. And it's also your testing. If you have your back cover and you put it on social media, then you're going to find out if people are actually interested in reading it, or if you have to readjust it, the audience, the tone of voice. So this back cover thing is really, really important. And once you have that, You can also design the front cover, and the combination of back cover and front cover actually is your test material. And if it works, you can start selling and promoting your book. And then the back cover is the basis for the structure of your book. I call it an outline here. And basically it's the table of contents. If on the back cover you promise the 7 steps to whatever, or the 15 tips for something else, then you know your book needs to have 7 chapters or 15 chapters. If your book is about something that you've experienced, an illness or a certain event, it could be before, during, and after, then your book needs to have those 3 parts. So the promise you make to your readers needs to come back in this outline. From the outline to start writing, I would take as much time as you have to put bullets in every chapter. In this chapter, I want to explain this, I want to do this exercise, I want to share this personal example, I want to share this story, I want to include this image. And then when you take a step back and you look at your outline, you will see if each chapter is complete and if things are in the right spot. So if you introduce a certain principle here, then the explanation needs to be before, and then later you can, elaborate on it, but you cannot put everything in one chapter. So you can put the different parts, the different ingredients in the right chapters. And then when you're sure that everything is in the right place, then you can start writing. And then you have the situation that I just explained, that the structure is already there. So if you feel like working on chapter 8 today, or if you feel like writing this personal example about a topic in chapter 3, you can just do that. If you're waiting at the bus stop and you have only 15 minutes, you can turn 1 bullet into a paragraph. So this means that you don't need a whole weekend or a whole evening or a whole week to write on your book, to dive deep. Even if you have half an hour during a day, you can still do something because the structure is already clear. And if you do this, the end result will be your book. Because there's no way you can go wrong if you do this. And this is actually the big secret that I discovered and that I apply for all my books and all the hundreds of people that I've personally helped to write their book. And a few times a year, I organize a writing retreat, 1 week to write your book or to make a start with your book or to finish a book. And there's really a lot of people who succeed in writing their book in a week, who write a complete book in a week. But I have to be honest, this doesn't go for fiction. So if you want to write a novel or a romance or a history or a science fiction, it's more difficult because you have to wait for inspiration and creativity. If it's a very personal book, like an autobiography or about relationships or with a lot of people involved, it's also impossible to do it in a week because it requires a lot of thinking. So you can make the structure in that week so that after the week, you only have to put in the content. But what you can do in a week, if it's a book about a certain method, about a training that you already have, an e-course that you have, something that is already fixed and without a lot of emotions that you can just, you have the structure and you put flesh on the bones. And an example of one book that you can write in a week is, for example, this book, Writer's Recipes. It's actually written during the writing retreat in Mallorca. And it's the recipes that we eat during lunch. So we took pictures of all the food. I interviewed the lady who makes the lunches. I translated from Spanish to English. And during that week, we wrote down the stories about the food, information about what we do during that day in the writing retreat, and the recipe for the food. And it's a real book, as you can see. It's not very thick, but it's a real book. Another book that I wrote in 1 day, but I wouldn't recommend this, was a very long day. I wrote this with somebody else. It's How to Write Your Book in a Week. We both had this system a few years ago when we just discovered it, and we decided to write it down. So this is a very factual book. There's no images, there's not a lot of examples. It's just step 1, step 2, step 3. But this book was written in one day, a very long day by 2 very experienced writers, but just to show you what you could do in a week. And right now I took the information in this book and I added all the experience and all the examples that I've collected in the past years, and I made it into a new book. This is how you write a book, and it's going to be much thicker. It took me 3 to 4 months to actually complete it. And it's, yeah, that's going to be like a real book. So that's impossible to do that quickly. And the goal is not to write a book quickly, but the goal that I wish for you is when you start writing a book that you actually complete it. Some people want to do it fast because then they either can go on with their life or the book will serve to sell their e-course, training, consultancy, coaching, other products. And other people consider writing the book as a process, as an experience. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. They just take every Saturday afternoon and sit down for 3 hours. And then maybe in 6 months, maybe in a year, maybe in 5 years, the book will be completed. The only thing I wish for you is that you're not wasting your time. So if you use this process that I've just shown, you will have a bigger chance to actually complete the book, and that every part you write is really useful and not wasted. So this is basically the most important thing I wanted to share. Really the reversing of the process. Most people think they know how it's done, but my experience is that if you reverse it, it works much better. So I'm looking at your questions, the publishing part. In the old days, the only way to publish a book was through a publisher. And it can still be very useful to approach some publishers. So I would advise you, if you have a book idea, to have a look in the bookstores what similar books are published by a publisher and contact those publishers. A lot of them won't react. A lot of them will take 3 months to react. A lot of them will reject you. But a few of them may invite you for a meeting. And during that meeting, whether they want to publish your book or not, you will get a lot of good questions. You will get feedback. So it's very useful to approach a publisher and to see if you can get in touch with them. But don't make that your only track while you're approaching publishers. You can also research the self-publishing route. And there's a lot of great websites like My Bestseller, Brave New Books, Lulu. There's a lot of websites where you can self-publish your book. Basically, you upload your document, you can design it, you can choose what stores you want it to be for sale, you choose a price, and the book is published. And it will be available everywhere. So that's not really the difficult process. The difficult process is to get your book ready for publishing. And in order to do that, you will definitely need an editor. You will probably need a writing coach or somebody who edits your book on a high level to see if the promise you make on your back cover is also in the book, so that you deliver what you promise. You will need a designer to design your book so it looks professional and not homemade and self-designed. And probably some proofreaders to give you honest feedback. That's all part of the publishing process. And very important, you can publish the best book ever, but if you don't market or promote it, nobody will know about your book. And my advice is not to start promoting once you've published the book, but to start promoting while you're writing it. Right now, today, to talk about your decision to write your book, to talk about the topic you want to write your book about. Involve your environment and your followers and new people in the process of writing your book and about the topic you write about. That's the only way to keep it going, to keep it flowing, and keep inventing new angles to address your book. What's in the media, maybe there's special days in the year that relate to your book, maybe there's frequently asked questions, things that happen during your day that are related to your book. Please find as many hooks as possible to talk about the topic of your book. And book promotion is not buy my book, buy my book. That doesn't work. It's talking about the topic and offering solutions for problems or challenges that people have with your topic. Let's see. At what moment in the process would you contact publishers? Somebody's asking. I would contact the publisher once I wrote my back cover, because then you have a one-pager to send to a publisher to indicate what your book will be about and how it differs from other books in the market. Let's see. How to deal with being very shy and scared about other people's opinions. That's a fair point, because a lot of people say, you know, what do I have to say? Why would I write a book? And if you look at your life, your work, or your private life, I'm sure that there's a lot of people who approach you with questions about your topic. There must be frequently asked questions. There must be some things that people always ask about. So remind yourself that you're not writing this book to put yourself in the spotlight. You're writing this book to help other people. And if you have to step in the spotlight in order to do that, then that's the way it has to be. But in the spotlight, you can keep on saying, this is not about me. This is about this important message that I want to share. So don't make it about you, make it about the topic. And of course, you're going to get reactions, and people always have opinions, but there's also going to be a lot of nice comments of people saying, wow, you're writing your book. I wish I would do that. You know, I wish I would have done that. How brave of you. And there's always going to be people with other opinions. So you have to balance that for yourself. What are you going to pay attention to? The fact that you're going to get your message out there, that you're going to help people and you're going to get nice reactions, or the fact that there's always going to be some people who will be negative or bullying or whatever. Mariska is asking, she thinks she will struggle writing a book about my method and how to go about citations. Base my method on lots of leadership gurus. You mean if you use other people's quotes? It's very important if you use material from others that you give them credit for it. So for example, if you want to use my reverse writing image, I would love it if you did that, because I want this to be shared, but it would be very nice and actually also correct if you would put my URL in there, or if you would say, this is Esther's method. So if you find something on a website, or if you read something somewhere and you want to quote it, please do, but make sure to mention the source. And for example, with pictures, it's different. You're not allowed to use somebody else's pictures. You have to pay for pictures, or you have to get permission, because those pictures are somebody's, somebody has copyright on those. And with text, it's different. For example, if you want to use the lyrics of a song, you cannot use the entire song. But if you want to use a few lines, you can use them if you mention the author, the singer. Let's see, what other questions? Okay, is there a difference between typical male and typical female books? 90% of attendees being women tonight. Yes, there are a lot of women. And in my writing retreats and workshops, there's also always a lot of women, maybe 90%, maybe 75%. And also I heard that the people buying books are mostly women, but men also buy books and read books. And men also want to write books. I do see a few men. So yes, there's a lot of women. But there's also men, and if you write a book about men, then, or for men, then men will read it, and also some women will read it. I wrote a book once about Mr. Wrong. Have you found your Mr. Wrong yet? And it's a pink book about a relationship with a player, a playboy. And guess what? Men were also buying the book because they wanted to see if they are also a Mr. Wrong. They wanted to know how to pick up women. or they read it because their girlfriend gave it to them. And in one case, a guy came up to me in the Caribbean. He said, "Oh, you're the author of this book. I have this book on my bookshelf, but I didn't read it." And I was like, "That's a weird story." And he said, yeah, I have to explain. My ex-girlfriend threw it over the fence into my garden. So, you know, you can write a book for women, but it may end up with men or the other way around. But it is good to target your audience. So if you want to write a book for women, you can make it more feminine. And don't be afraid to make a choice for your target group, because if you keep it general, it will appeal to nobody. So dare to make a choice. Do you write for a higher age group? Do you write for a higher education? Do you write for a certain type of people? It's very important to pinpoint your audience. A question from Mark: how to make it interesting for readers? Can you clarify that, Mark? How to make it interesting, how to make your book interesting? Pilar says the guy kept the book anyway. Yeah, it's still on his bookshelf. And I think it's one of the funniest stories ever. You know, you can get a lot of reviews about your book, but this one is special. So Mark, how to make it interesting for readers. Let me give my version of a reply. I hope this is what you ask for, and otherwise, please clarify. If you do your research before writing your book, if you write your back cover and you test it online, you will know if people are interested. If you post your back cover and your cover and nobody reacts to it, then you know you're not hitting the right tone. If you get a lot of questions, for example, with the book about Mr. Wrong, I got so many reactions. Women sending me their diaries, guys contacting me, they wanted to do a test to see if they were Mr. Wrong. I got so many reactions that I actually invited those reactions. I set up the big Mr. Wrong survey, and I got hundreds of reactions. And all the reactions I got also ended up in the book. And I interviewed people. I could use people's stories. They sent me, you know, their diaries, references, emails. So it provided a lot of material. So if you get no reaction at all to your back cover and your cover, why would you write the book? Apparently, either there's no need for it, it's not interesting, you have to rephrase it, you have to pinpoint your audience better. And if you find out that nobody's interested in your book after writing just that one page, that's better than after working for 2 years and having a 300-page document, right? So you can try out 10 different back covers to find the one that works before you do all the work writing the book. Storytelling. Yes, Mark, this is a very important one. Storytelling is not only important for non-fiction books. Do you know the difference between fiction and non-fiction? Fiction books are science fiction, romance, thrillers, everything that's not real, it's fiction. Non-fiction books are anything that's based on real life. It can be a biography, it can be a management book, it can be a personal development book. So that's the big distinction. And I used to think that storytelling was just for fiction, for storybooks. But it's not true. What if I would have told you, this is how you write a book? Write the back cover, make an outline, publish the book. This would have been a very short workshop, right? What you probably like is my personal stories, the examples I give, I show you books, I go into details about certain stories. That's storytelling, and it works for anything. You can think, oh, but there already is a book about my topic. Well, how many management books are there? The good thing is that every book is different because everybody experienced it differently. I know, for example, there's a lot of people writing a book about an illness they've had and they recovered, for example, from cancer. And the storyline is the same for everybody. I was healthy, I got sick, I got better, and now my look on life is different. right? It's the same story, but every book is different because every person is different. And everybody shares their story in a different way and experienced in a different way and has their personal way of sharing the lessons that they learned. So storytelling is really, really important. And I can advise you to have a look at the hero's journey. I'm going to send you an email tomorrow with the replay of this workshop and some links, and I'll include the hero's journey because that's actually the most basic form of storytelling that you find in every Hollywood movie, in every book. And basically you have a hero, the main character, who lives a normal life, and then something happens that's an invitation to an adventure. And usually the hero refuses. Oh, it's interesting, but no, thank you. I'm happy where I am. But then they cannot refuse this invitation. Maybe they get sick, maybe they get kidnapped, maybe they have to leave, whatever. And they get into this adventure. There's usually a helper, a mentor, and there's people or creatures working against them. So with lots of ups and downs, finally they reach the most deepest point of their adventure. They think they're going to die, they think they're going to fail, they think they're going to get lost. And then at the deepest moment, something happens and they find the treasure, whether it's something physical or an insight or whatever. And then they return back to their normal world with this treasure, with this wisdom, and they want to share it with others. They have changed, but the world around them is still the same. And that's the circle that you will find in the image I'm going to send you of the hero's journey. This can be your personal journey. This can be a fiction book. You will recognize it from now on in every Hollywood movie, in every book, in every story, every fairy tale that's told. The fight between good and bad, the fight between the upper world and the underworld. A lot of religious stories are based on this. The alchemist, Paulo Coelho, the guy leaves his hometown, has adventures, comes back and discovers that, you know, his hometown is actually where the treasure is. So try storytelling, not just big stories, but also the small stories that you experience every day. For example, if you're a coach, you will have discussions or interactions with clients every day. Each interaction you have with your kids, with a colleague at the coffee machine, with a client, has a little treasure, a little story that you can share on social media, in a blog, in your book. And those things are what are nice. Those are the things that are nice to read. And if you have a line of stories and you tie them together, you have a chapter. Or if you have a collection of blogs and you put them together, you have a book. And I find that most authors try to look for big stories. And I have to sit down and I have to think of a story. But stories are around us. Think about something that happened to you today that you could translate to an example in your book, in the book you're writing, or in the book you're thinking about. Think of something that happened today. If you need my help, just unmute yourself and share your example with me. And I would like to show you how you can use something very simple and very daily in your book. Anybody? Well, anyway, it enabled me to have a sip of tea. Somebody's asking, how about poetry? Can you include that into a book, or would that confuse the audience too much? You know what? You can include anything you want in your book. I think poetry is great. It can be a poetry book, or you can put the poems, you know, one for every chapter, or you can include them in the text. I even read a book once that was a love story, and it had a recipe at the beginning of each chapter. And the recipe corresponded to the feeling of the main character in that chapter. So maybe the character had a romantic dinner, and then the recipe of that dinner would be there. Maybe she had a fight with her lover, and then there would be a very fiery recipe. So you can include anything you want in a book. I usually include quotes, lyrics from songs, poems. I even put some diary entrances into my book. In one of the first books, this one, I put like scrapbook, you know, pictures, drawings, newspaper articles, anything. You can put anything in your book. It's your book. And as long as you think it's related, and it may make your book special, it may make your book different from other books. Dagmar asked, would you recommend making a PDF publishing that can also be printed as a book? Wait, I lost you. That can also be printed as a hardcover. If you want to provide free ideas and solutions, then you have to keep it very easy for people to get it. And free is easy. So if you have a free PDF, people can download it online. They don't have to pay anything. The difference between a price of 0 and a price of 10 cents is the fact that people have to go through a payment module. And whether you charge 10 cents or €2 doesn't matter. It's the difference between 0 and a payment module. And if you offer a free book, then people may think it has no value. So you can put the PDF in your web shop for €10 and then give them a coupon to buy it for free, or say it's free this week or this month, or because you're a reader of my newsletter, you get it for free. So you have to make sure it gets some value. And then if people like it, they will share it, right? More people will read it. And if your objective is to get your message across to as many people as possible, then that's the best way to do it. I would also always, if you have either a paid or a free product, put a few pages as a preview. So people can read, you know, your tone of voice, see the table of contents, so they know what to expect. And that way you won't have any unhappy customers who get something different from what they expected. The other thing is collect reviews. If somebody likes your book, ask them to leave a review. If they download your PDF for free, collect their email address. So you can tell them that you're organizing a workshop about your topic, or your second book is out, or you ask for their opinion or something like that. So always ask for something in return. Let's see, any more? To include a lot of different things in your book puts a heavy burden on the designing, and that's right. This book is very nice. It's exactly as I wanted it. And the PDF of this book is exactly the same as this book. But this book can never be an ebook. To be an ebook, to read on your Kindle, all the design has to be taken out of it. Because an ebook is only text, and you can have some images, but you cannot determine, I want this image to be exactly here. The image will be on the page somewhere, but you don't know where. So I would advise to create a book that can be read on print as a PDF and also as an ebook. So you can put illustrations in there, but don't fix them in one place. That will make your life a lot easier. So then one file can be uploaded as an ebook, as a PDF, and as a printable file. Can you include special experiences as an anecdote? Yes, definitely. I always advise people, when you're making this structure, this outline of all your chapters, it's nice if all your chapters have a certain rhythm. For example, you always start with a personal experience, and then you pull out a theory or a tip or inspiration. Then you have some more examples to explain it. And at the end of the chapter, you have, for example, an interview with an expert, or you have an exercise for readers to do. And then if the next chapter, even though it's about a different topic, follows that same rhythm, then the book gets a certain flow and people know what to expect in the format, and then the content will be the surprise, instead of not knowing where it's leading and feeling like the book has no structure. And of course, this is different for a fiction book and for a non-fiction book. What I'm talking about is mainly non-fiction, management books and biographies and personal development books. And fiction books, the nice thing about fiction books is that there's a surprise factor. You have no idea where it's going. But still, even for fiction books, I think we all like the chapters to be more or less the same length. Because when you read it on the train or before you go to sleep, you want to stop reading at the end of a chapter. And you need to be able to determine it's going to take an hour or half an hour or 15 minutes for each chapter, and not have one chapter of 3 hours and the other chapter of 2 pages. So a certain rhythm is always nice, but non-fiction books tend to be more structured. Let's see, what other questions do you have? Who of you, yeah, it's difficult to, maybe I can see all of you. Let's see. Yes, now I see more. Who of you is thinking about a fiction book? So a romance, a thriller, a science fiction, anything not real? Okay, Afke, maybe. Okay. And who of you is thinking about a non-fiction book? So biography, business book. Okay, so most people are in the non-fiction area. Who of you is just playing with the idea and hasn't started yet? Okay. Who of you has already started, more or less? Okay. And who is like in the middle, going strong? Ooh, anybody almost finished? Yay, congratulations. So you're in the stage of looking for a publisher. Okay, well, there's a little bit of time left. I have some tips for most of you. If you're starting or you're in the middle of the process, the most important thing is to stay motivated. And usually you start very enthusiastic and then, you know, other things take over again. So how do you make sure you create time to continue writing your book? And I want to ask the people who are writing a book, do you put appointments in your schedule? Do you write with other people? Do you make deadlines for yourself? Or is it when you have time left, then you write on your book? Anybody wants to say anything? What works for you to be motivated to actually write your book? For me personally, a deadline really helps. And I usually wait until, you know, just before the deadline. And then I write like crazy and I finish the book because I've done it many times. I know more or less what it takes. I remember my second book, I had put a deadline with the publisher. And I was going on a sailing trip in the Caribbean. So I thought, hey, I'll write during the sailing trip, right? The book is about living your dream. So perfect. So I postponed the writing until the sailing trip. And then I realized, uh-oh, I get seasick on the boat. So I can't write on the boat. And then when we were in a harbor, of course, I wanted to get off the boat and do sightseeing and nice things. So basically, I returned from the sailing trip 10 days before the deadline from the publisher. And I hadn't written a single word. The only thing I had done is to make this structure with 23 tips that I had for people who want to live their dream. So in my mind, every time I was sailing and seasick, I was like, oh, I have an idea. Chapter 17, I have to include this point. And I wrote it down and then I just continued. So when I got back from the sailing trip, I thought, okay, it's now or never. I have to write this book in 10 days. So I locked myself up in an air-conditioned room. And I thought, oh, I can never do it. And I saw the whole book and I was overwhelmed. Then I forced myself, okay, look at this chapter, look at this bullet point. Can you turn this bullet point into a sentence, into a paragraph? And I was like, oh, but the whole book. No, this bullet point. Can you turn it into a paragraph? Yes, of course I can. And I turned that one bullet into a paragraph. And then I was like, no, next bullet. Can you turn it into a paragraph? And after turning a few bullets into a paragraph, suddenly a chapter was half finished. And I was like, ah, this is how it works. I can do this. So I forced myself to focus on the details, to turn a bullet into a paragraph. And then when I had a few paragraphs, I would just connect them and write an introduction for the chapter and a conclusion for the chapter, and I would go to the next chapter. And so I learned that with this system, you can also write a book under pressure. As long as you take this beginning process of structuring and outlining very serious and very detailed, and you will see that you want to start writing. I want to start writing now. But if you start too early, you will have to pay the price later. And it's like when you want to shoot a bow, you know, you have to pull back the string, and you can pull it back a little bit and shoot, but the arrow won't go very far. The further you pull back the string and the better you aim, the better your shot will be. And that's actually what we're doing with this method. With the reverse writing method, you make sure you pull the string as far as you can, you aim well, and then when you finally let go and start writing, and it will really feel like shooting an arrow, you go, and you will really be able to put all your energy into your book and not lose energy in the process, or by writing the wrong things or writing the wrong book that nobody wants to read. Monique has an accountability buddy that really works well. I find people who buddy up with other people who are writing, or just somebody who will be their buddy, say, I'm writing today. Or people who have an online call together in Zoom, and they just tell each other, okay, for the next 2 hours, I'm going to do this, this, and this. What are you going to do? Okay, let's start. And you just write. You look at each other every now and then, you write. And after 2 hours, you say, okay, what did you do? That's an accountability buddy. I notice also during my writing retreats that because there's more writers together, everybody's writing on their own book, but you create a kind of focus energy together. You find that in some co-working spaces as well. You create a focus energy, and because everybody is working and you have no distractions, because I take care of the food, I make sure there's no distractions, it's always a very quiet places, you get a lot done. And then if you get stuck and there's somebody who helps you get over that hurdle, you will keep going. And when you're alone in your house and you get stuck, you look for something else to do. You go do the dishes, you clean your apartment, which is also very useful, but it won't help you to get your book finished. Okay, it makes sense to record your thoughts in case you're not in a position to write. Mark, that's a good point. And especially if you have the structure already in place, if you make a note, you can make the note in the right place. So I usually use a notepad on my phone, and I just write down a sentence or an idea, and then I know exactly where to put it, because, you know, this is the topic of chapter 3, or this is the example I want to use in chapter 7. So don't wait until, you know, tonight when I'm home in my office, when I start to write. If you have an idea, write it down immediately, or record it in your voice recorder on your phone, or keep a notebook with you. Put everything in one place. That works really well. And then a last word about editors. In Dutch, we have 2 types of editors. You have redacteur and editor. And I don't know what those 2 words are in English, but I would call it a high-level editor who looks at, does it make sense what you're writing? If you say your book is going to do this, does your writing actually do this? And an editor, or like you know, the normal editor looks at, you know, are your sentences too long? Do you use the punctuation in the correct way? You don't make spelling mistakes. That's also very useful. But if you have an editor correcting your punctuation while your book doesn't make sense, then it's going to be a very correct book that doesn't do justice to what you said you would be doing. So I would recommend to get a writing coach or a redacteur who helps you in this high-level planning, the outlining of your book, seeing if your writing style makes sense. And then at the end, you have an editor. So I wouldn't worry about, you know, the little details, if your sentences are correct, if you make spelling mistakes. That can all be solved with spell check and a good editor. In the beginning, I would focus on the higher level. Am I doing what I promised to deliver? And then at the end, when everything is ready, I would get a few proofreaders to read your book. And I have the 3 secret questions that you have to ask your proofreaders. I'm going to put them in the email tomorrow as well, but I'm going to tell them to you. The first question I always ask my proofreaders is, what parts of the book did you really like? And it will be easy for them to say, like, oh, this is good, this is interesting. Then you ask them, what parts did you fall asleep? You know, there's parts of the book you have to struggle through, like, hey, this is interesting. And then you completely lose track and you want to do something else and you're not interested anymore. Those parts you need to indicate as well, because you need to work on them. And the last question is, what did you miss? So you're reading this book about this topic and there's all this interesting information, but what you missed is this question, this topic, this answer. So now we went, you know, in the bird's eye, the helicopter view over the whole process of writing a book. And I'm sure once you're writing, you'll have many more questions and you'll find many more things that you have to think about. Everything is available online. You know, you Google, you find it, and you may find different opinions, but if you have a question, look for it. Look for support. Don't stay struggling by yourself. But keep in mind the bigger picture of this process. And to give you an example, this book that I've created, so I started with this book a few years ago, How to Write a Book in a Week. Now I put all the examples and inspiration and questions in, and I've created the book, This is How You Write a Book. I wrote it in Dutch, Zo schrijf je een boek. I was finished, then it went to the editor. The editor did the spell check. She made some suggestions. What do you mean with this? You have to be consistent, blah, blah, blah. I went through it, updated it. Then it went to the designer. It's now at the designer. When it comes back from the designer, I have to go through it again to see if everything is in the right place. Maybe make some last minute edits. And then it goes to the proofreaders and then it will be published. The moment the document that went to the designer, I also send it to a translator because this is the final document. So while the book is being designed, the English book is being created. And then when the design is ready for the Dutch book, the English book can be put into the same design. You know, the titles will be the same, the structure of the book will be the same. And what I did, I took this book that went to the designer and I'm creating a workbook. So I'm taking out all the examples and I'm just leaving in the questions and the exercises. So that when you read the book, you have a separate book and you can make notes, you can cross out what you've already did, you can write down your questions. So it will really be a workbook. So I'm actually creating 4 books at the same time. And it sounds really weird, but it's also logical. And I'm recording an e-course because the structure of the book is the structure that I want to put into an e-course. So actually this week I'm recording the Dutch e-course and then in a few weeks I'm recording the English e-course. So then I can offer the people that want to write a book, a workbook and an e-course. And that way I can transfer all my knowledge to you in a very simple way, in a way that's cheap for you and that's easy for me. I don't have to explain the same story many times, and I can focus on the people who want one-on-one coaching or who want to do small group coaching like we're doing right now. So I don't want to keep repeating my same story. I want to help people who already have the knowledge, who want to work on their own topic. Okay, so you always say you have to do it this way, but now I'm stuck in this situation. How would you solve this? Or I wrote this, but it seems to clash with what I want to achieve. Can you have a look at what I wrote and see if you can help me? So this is the route that I've designed for myself. I want to make my knowledge available. And then on top of that, I want to give specific coaching or mentoring to people who are writing their book. So this is also something for you to think about. What if you could transfer all your knowledge onto paper and give it to people? And then you can work with highly motivated people who already have the knowledge, but who just want help applying it to their situation. My book, Debbie is asking, will it be available on Kobo? Yes, it will. So I'm creating the printed book, and the printed book can also be made into PDF, and the PDF will also be made into an ebook, which is available on Kobo and on Kindle. So the Dutch book will be available in, let me guess, it depends on the designer. Actually, his mother died last weekend. So the book was supposed to be ready this week, and then he had this horrible tragedy. So I don't know exactly, but I think it will be about 3 weeks before the book will be ready. Like I said, you know, I really want to share my knowledge, and I love to have this workshop with you and to help you proceed with your book. But I know this book that I wrote will be very, very useful to you. And if you want to do yourself a favor and do me a favor, it would be really nice if you would order the book, because then I also know how many books to print. And, you know, it's just nice when you write a book if people actually want to buy it. So don't feel pressured at all, but I'm going to include the link and then see if you like it. And you know, if you think it will help you to start or continue with this process of book writing. So I want to conclude our time together. I hope that I gave you some inspiration, some tips. The big thing is that you have to do it. You have to do it yourself, but you can get support from each other, from somebody in your environment, from me if you want to. The main thing is, if you have this big idea inside of you, please find a way to put it onto paper so that other people can benefit from your knowledge. Don't keep it to yourself. You owe it to the world to bring your idea out there. So I look forward to seeing your books. If you have any questions, if you know, there's anything I didn't answer or anything you would like to know, please let me know, send me a message. And I will send you this replay tomorrow, and the things I've mentioned, the self-publishing websites, the hero's journey, the 3 questions for the proofreaders, everything you need to know. So good luck with your book. No more excuses. And I hope to hear from you when your book is out there, or if I can be of any help. Thank you. Bye. Have a good evening.